There are people in this world who seem untouchable, not because they are lucky, not because life handed them everything, but because, no matter what comes at them, they remain effective, focused, disciplined, unbothered. And here's what almost no one tells you. Those people are not following a modern productivity system. They are following a philosophy that is over 2,000 years old. And today, that philosophy is going to change the way you live. Welcome to Wisdom of the Stoics, the channel where ancient philosophy meets the challenges of the modern world. Every single day, we bring you the timeless wisdom of Marcus Aurelius, Epictetus, Seneca, and the great Stoic thinkers, not as history lessons, not as academic lectures, but as living, breathing tools you can use right now to build a stronger mind, a stronger character, and a stronger life. If you're new here, welcome. You have found something rare, and if you've been with us for a while, you already know what's coming. So take a breath, settle in, because what you're about to hear, you needed to hear a long time ago. Let me ask you something honest. How many times have you started over? A new habit, a new routine, a new you. Monday morning, full of fire, full of intention. And by Wednesday, you're back to the same patterns, the same distractions, the same version of yourself that you swore you were going to leave behind. You're not alone. In fact, this is the quiet epidemic of modern life. Millions of people, intelligent, capable, hard-working people, locked in a permanent cycle of almost disciplined, almost consistent, almost effective. And here's the brutal truth that most self-help books will never say out loud. The problem is not your habits. The problem is your philosophy. See, you can copy someone's morning routine. You can download their productivity app. You can follow their 30-day challenge. But none of it sticks unless it is rooted in something deeper. Something that speaks not just to your schedule, but to your character. That's what the Stoics understood. More than 2,000 years ago, men like Marcus Aurelius, emperor of the most powerful civilization on earth, sat alone before sunrise and wrote privately in his journal, not for fame, not for followers, but to sharpen himself, a man who commanded legions, who held the fate of millions in his hands. And still, he woke up every morning asking himself one question: am I becoming the person I was built to be? Epictetus, a man born into slavery, who owned nothing, who had nothing, developed a philosophy of absolute inner freedom that kings would later study to survive their darkest hours. And Seneca, Rome's greatest writer and advisor, who wrote these words in a letter to his friend: "It is not that I am brave, it is that I know what is worth fearing, and most things are not." These were not passive men. These were not dreamers. These were effective men. Men who mastered themselves, and by mastering themselves, they mastered their world. And today, we are going to extract the 7 core habits that made them extraordinary. Not theories, not motivational fluff. 7 concrete, actionable habits, grounded in Stoic philosophy that will quietly but permanently transform the way you think, act, and live. Stay with me, because the first habit alone might rearrange everything you thought you knew about control. Habit number 1. Control what you can, release what you cannot. Epictetus opened his great work, the Enchiridion, with these words, and those words have never, in 2,000 years, lost their power. Some things are in our control and others are not. Simple sentence, profound consequence, because here is where almost every human being wastes their greatest resource, their mental energy. Think about your last week. How much time did you spend worrying about something you could not change? The economy, what someone thought of you, whether a plan was going to fall apart, whether someone was going to let you down, worry, anxiety, frustration, resentment. These are almost always the result of one thing: trying to control what was never yours to control. The Stoics called this the dichotomy of control. And it is not just a philosophical idea. It is a daily practice, a habit. Every single morning, Marcus Aurelius, before he faced the demands of an empire, would mentally divide his day. On one side, the things within his power, his intentions, his effort, his response, his values, his words. On the other side, the things outside his power, other people's decisions, circumstances, outcomes, fate, and he made a sacred commitment to himself. He would pour everything into column 1 and release column 2 completely. Now, this sounds simple, but let's be honest. It is one of the hardest things a human being can practice, because our instinct is to grip, to control, to fix everything around us, because we believe that's how we stay safe. But here is what Seneca wrote to his friend Lucilius in his letters. The greatest obstacle to living is expectancy, which hangs upon tomorrow and loses today. When you are consumed with controlling what you cannot control, you are absent from what you can do right now. Highly effective people, whether they have read the Stoics or not, share this habit. They have an almost eerie ability to let things go, not because they don't care, but because they care about the right things. Here is the practice. When something disturbs your peace, pause. Ask one question: is this in my control? If yes, act immediately and fully. If no, release it, completely and intentionally. That single question, practiced daily, will do more for your focus and your effectiveness than any productivity system ever built. Marcus Aurelius wrote in his Meditations, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength." This is not passive resignation. This is strategic mastery. The person who wastes no energy on what cannot be changed has all their energy left for what can. That is habit 1, and it is the foundation upon which everything else is built. Habit number 2, practice voluntary discomfort. Now this one surprises almost everyone, because when modern people think about effectiveness, they usually think about comfort. They think about convenience, efficiency, optimization, finding the smoothest path with the least resistance. We're constantly told to make life easier. Order food instead of cooking. Scroll instead of sitting quietly. Avoid difficult conversations. Choose whatever feels most comfortable in the moment. And little by little, without realizing it, we begin organizing our entire lives around avoiding discomfort. The Stoics looked at this very differently. They believed that a life built entirely on comfort eventually becomes fragile, not because comfort itself is bad, but because comfort, when it becomes constant, quietly becomes your master. One of the clearest examples comes from Seneca. This was not a man who preached hardship because he had no other choice. Seneca was one of the wealthiest men in Rome. He advised emperors. He owned magnificent homes. He lived surrounded by luxury that most people could scarcely imagine. And yet, several times each year, he deliberately stepped away from all of it. He chose to live as though he possessed almost nothing. In his letters, he describes eating the cheapest, simplest food he could find. He exchanged fine clothing for coarse, rough garments. He slept on a hard bed instead of one designed for comfort. He stripped away every luxury that had become familiar, not because he hated wealth, not because suffering was somehow noble, but because he wanted to answer one question honestly. As he endured those simple conditions, he would quietly ask himself, "Is this the condition that I feared?" And every time, the answer was the same, no. What he had feared for so long turned out to be far less frightening once he actually experienced it. That realization gave him something more valuable than comfort itself. It gave him freedom, because fear loses much of its power the moment it becomes familiar. This is what the Stoics understood centuries ago, and what many of us have quietly forgotten. A comfortable life does not automatically create a strong person. In fact, endless comfort often creates the opposite. When every inconvenience is avoided, your tolerance for difficulty slowly begins to shrink. A delayed flight ruins your entire day. A single criticism feels deeply personal. An uncomfortable conversation becomes something you postpone for months. A setback feels like proof that you should quit. Not because life has become harder, but because your capacity to endure discomfort has quietly weakened. The problem isn't the challenge. The problem is that you've stopped practicing resilience. Now imagine the opposite. Imagine choosing small, manageable discomforts on purpose. Nothing extreme, nothing reckless. Just enough to remind yourself that you are stronger than your preferences. slowly something remarkable begins to happen. Your threshold for adversity expands. Things that once felt unbearable become manageable. Things that once intimidated you begin losing their emotional grip. Your confidence stops depending on whether life feels easy. Instead, it begins growing from something far more reliable. The knowledge that you've already survived difficulty before, and you can do it again. Think about the most effective people you've ever known. Whether they're entrepreneurs, athletes, artists, parents, leaders, or ordinary people with extraordinary discipline. What do they all have in common? Rarely are they the most comfortable people. Instead, they are the people who have become deeply familiar with discomfort. The CEO who still wakes before sunrise to train while everyone else sleeps. The writer who sits patiently in front of a blank page instead of escaping into distraction. The musician who practices the same difficult passage hundreds of times. The parent who chooses the uncomfortable conversation instead of convenient silence. The student who studies while others look for excuses. The person who apologizes first even when pride begs them not to. These people are not exceptional because hardship avoided them. They are exceptional because they stopped avoiding hardship. The Stoics had a word for this disciplined way of living. Ascesis. Not punishment, not self-denial for its own sake, but deliberate training of character. A daily practice of becoming slightly stronger than yesterday. Because just as muscles grow only when challenged, character grows only when tested. The reward isn't suffering. The reward is freedom. Freedom from needing perfect conditions before taking action. Freedom from panic when plans suddenly change. Freedom from being controlled by every passing emotion. Because the person who can remain calm inside discomfort can adapt almost anywhere. They are no longer enslaved by the need to always feel good. Seneca expressed this beautifully when he wrote, "Set aside a certain number of days, during which you shall be content with the scantiest and cheapest fare, with coarse and rough dress, saying to yourself all the while, 'Is this the condition that I feared?'" Even today, those words remain surprisingly relevant. So here is your practice for this week. Choose one form of voluntary discomfort. Wake up before your alarm feels comfortable. Finish your shower with cold water for a minute. Walk instead of driving when you reasonably can. Skip unnecessary distractions. Leave your phone in another room and simply sit with your own thoughts. Eat a simple meal instead of chasing constant indulgence. Or finally, have the conversation you've been postponing because temporary comfort felt easier than lasting peace. Whatever you choose, do not approach it as punishment. Approach it as training. Because every time you voluntarily choose a small discomfort, you quietly weaken the power that future hardships hold over you. You teach your mind an unforgettable lesson. I don't need perfect circumstances to remain steady. And that lesson becomes a form of wealth no one can take away. That is why truly effective people do not wait for hardship to shape them. They prepare long before hardship arrives. They willingly walk towards small challenges, so that when life eventually sends larger ones without permission, they are no longer meeting adversity for the first time. They have already become the kind of person who knows exactly how to stand when life becomes difficult. And perhaps that is the deepest freedom Stoicism offers. Not a life without hardship, but a character that no longer fears it. Habit number 3. Act with intention, not reaction. Here is one of the most important gaps between the effective and the ordinary. The ordinary person reacts. The effective person responds. Those two words sound similar, but they represent completely different ways of being in the world. A reaction is automatic, unconscious, driven by emotion, ego, or habit. Someone criticizes you, you react with anger. A plan falls apart, you react with panic. An opportunity appears, you react with either reckless excitement or paralyzing fear. A response is deliberate, considered, chosen. The Stoics called the gap between stimulus and response a pause, and they considered that pause one of the most powerful tools available to a human being. Marcus Aurelius wrote in his Meditations, "Between stimulus and response there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom." Now, modern psychology discovered this truth only in the last century. The Stoics were practicing it 2,000 years ago. They called it prosauche, attention, a constant, vigilant awareness of your own inner state. The habit is this: before you speak, pause. Before you act, pause. Before you send that message, make that decision, or walk into that room with that energy, pause. Ask, is this action aligned with the person I have decided to be? Not, what do I feel like doing right now? Because feelings are not facts. Impulses are not instructions. Epictetus taught that every impression, every thought, emotion, or external event comes to us with a handle and a blade. We can grasp it by the handle, calmly, intentionally, or we can grab the blade, impulsively, and wound ourselves. Highly effective people have an almost uncanny sense of deliberateness. They seem unhurried, even when they are busy. They seem unrattled, even when they face chaos. And the reason is not that they feel nothing. The reason is that they have trained themselves to choose before they act. The practice. Every morning before your day begins, take 5 minutes. Just 5. Sit still. Set your intention for the day. Decide in advance how you will respond to difficulty, to distraction, to the people who test your patience. You are not predicting the future. You are preparing your character for whatever the future brings. That is the third habit, and it is what separates the person who is lived by life from the person who lives deliberately. We are halfway through, and I want to pause for just a moment, because if even one of these habits has already shifted something in your thinking, that is not a coincidence. That is your philosophy beginning to change. Before we continue, drop a comment below. Tell me, which of the first 3 habits hit closest to home? Was it the dichotomy of control, voluntary discomfort, or acting with intention? I read every single comment on this channel. Your answers shape the content we create for you. And if you haven't subscribed yet, this is the moment. Hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you never miss another piece of wisdom from this channel. Now, let's keep going, because the next habit is one that most people get dangerously wrong. Habit number 4. Live by your values, not your moods. Here is a question the Stoics ask themselves constantly. Who is in charge of you today? Is it your values, the principles you have deliberately chosen, the character you have consciously built? Or is it your mood, the emotional weather of the morning, which changes with no warning and no logic? Marcus Aurelius, and remember, this was the most powerful man in the known world, wrestled with this question every single day. He wrote in his meditations, "Waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be one." That single line contains everything, because most people spend enormous energy talking about who they want to be, thinking about it, posting about it, planning it, and almost no energy simply being it right now, in this moment, regardless of how they feel. Here is the truth about moods. Moods are not reliable. They are not logical. They are influenced by sleep, by blood sugar, by the weather, by a comment someone made in passing. If you wait until you feel like doing the right thing, you will do it inconsistently, at best. The Stoics understood that values are not feelings. Values are commitments, and commitments do not bend based on what you feel this morning. Epictetus said, "He is a wise man who does not grieve for the things which he has not, but rejoices for those which he has." The highly effective person has done something that takes genuine courage. They have decided who they are, and then they act as that person, even when they don't feel like it. They are honest, even when dishonesty would be easier. They are disciplined, even when laziness would be more comfortable. They are kind, even when resentment is what they feel. They are focused, even when distraction is screaming for their attention. Not because they have no feelings, but because their identity is stronger than their feelings. Here is the practice. Write down 3 to 5 core values, not aspirational words, actual commitments. Then, every day, before you engage with the world, ask, am I living as this person today? Not in theory, in action, in the next hour, in the next conversation, in the next decision. Because the gap between who we say we are and who we actually are lives in the moments we choose our mood over our values. Close that gap. That is habit 4, and it is where character is built, not in the extraordinary moments, but in the thousand small, ordinary ones. Habit number 5. Pursue virtue, not validation. We live in an age of extraordinary noise. Every achievement is photographed. Every opinion is broadcast. Every accomplishment is measured not by its quality, but by the number of people who approved it. And slowly, without realizing it, we begin to build our lives for an audience instead of for a purpose. The Stoics would look at this world and feel a quiet sadness, because they knew, with devastating clarity, that the hunger for approval is one of the most powerful destroyers of a truly effective life. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "I have often wondered how it is that every man loves himself more than all the rest of men, but yet sets less value on his own opinion of himself than on the opinions of others." Read that again. We say we love ourselves, but we trust other people's opinion of us more than our own. We work harder for their approval than we work for our own integrity. The Stoics built their lives around one concept, arete, the Greek word for virtue, for excellence, for the fullest expression of human goodness. And arete requires no audience. It doesn't need to be seen to be real. It doesn't need to be praised to matter. It doesn't need to go viral to have value. Highly effective people have made peace with something that most people find terrifying. Doing the right thing in the dark, when no one is watching, when no one will ever know. Epictetus said, "Seek not the good in external things. Seek it in yourself." The validation seeker builds a life that collapses the moment the applause stops. The virtue seeker builds a life that cannot be shaken, because it is rooted not in what others think, but in who they actually are. Here is the habit. This week, do one good thing that no one will see. Help someone anonymously. Do the extra work no one asked for. Tell the truth when the lie would have been easier and undetectable. Not to feel superior, not to post about it later, just to practice building your character in private, the way a tree grows its roots, deep underground, long before anyone sees the tree. Because here is the Stoic promise. When your life is built on virtue instead of validation, you become unfillable. No compliment can inflate you dangerously. No criticism can destroy you. No silence can undo you. You know who you are. And that, in a world of desperate approval seekers, is one of the rarest, most powerful things a person can be. Habit number 6. Use death as a teacher. Memento mori. Latin for remember that you will die. Now, I know what you're thinking. This sounds dark. This sounds like the kind of thing that would paralyze a person with fear, not make them more effective. But the Stoics, and every highly effective person who has internalized this idea, would tell you something different, something almost counterintuitive. The awareness of death is not the enemy of a good life. It is the most powerful fuel for one. Marcus Aurelius wrote this in his Meditations, a private journal he never intended for anyone to read. You could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think. Pause on that. You could leave life right now, not as a morbid fantasy, as a clarifying fact. Because here is what the Stoics discovered. When you truly, genuinely, daily reckon with the fact that your time here is limited, your relationship with time transforms completely. Suddenly, the petty argument isn't worth it. Suddenly, the dream you've been postponing demands attention. Suddenly, the people you love deserve the presence you've been withholding. Suddenly, the work you keep saying you'll do tomorrow needs to be done today. Seneca, who watched many people die and eventually faced his own death with extraordinary composure, wrote one of the most striking lines in all of philosophy. It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste a great deal of it. The problem is not that life is short. The problem is that we live as if it isn't. Highly effective people do not wait for a diagnosis, a loss, or a near-death experience to wake them up. They wake themselves up every day, deliberately. They ask, if I had limited time left, is this how I would spend it? And that question, asked honestly, is one of the most ruthlessly clarifying tools in existence. It strips away the unnecessary, the trivial, the postponed. It leaves only what actually matters. The practice. Find a quiet moment today and ask yourself this question, genuinely, not as an exercise, but as a truth. What would I do differently if I knew this year was my last? Write the answers down. Then look at how you're actually spending your days. The gap between those two things, that gap is your invitation to change. Because memento mori is not about dying. It is about the only thing more important than death, learning how to truly live. And now the seventh habit. The one that, in many ways, is the culmination of everything that came before. Amor fati, love what is. Amor fati, Latin for love of fate. Not acceptance of fate, not tolerance of fate. Love. This is perhaps the most radical idea in all of Stoic philosophy, and it is the one that separates the truly effective, truly free human being and from everyone else. Here is what it means. Not just the good things, not just the victories, the beautiful moments, the outcomes you planned for, but all of it, the failures, the loss, the betrayal, the illness, the setback, the season that looked like ruin. The Stoics did not teach that these things are good. They did not teach you to pretend that pain is pleasant. They taught something far more sophisticated. Every single thing that happens to you, including the things that break you, is material. Material for growth, for wisdom, for character, for becoming the person that your struggles were always trying to build. Marcus Aurelius, who lost children, who fought endless wars, who was surrounded by political enemies, who battled his own health for years, wrote, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. The obstacle is not blocking your path. The obstacle is your path." Think about the hardest thing that has ever happened to you, not what you lost in it, what you gained, what it built in you, what you discovered about your strength, your values, your capacity, that you could not have known any other way. Almost certainly the version of you that exists today, the version that has depth and understanding and compassion, was shaped by the very things that felt like destruction at the time. The Stoics called this turning the obstacle upside down. Where others see disaster, the effective person sees direction. Where others see the end, the effective person sees the beginning of what comes next. Epictetus, who was enslaved, who had no freedom, no possessions, no external power, became one of the most influential minds in history. Why? Because he loved what was. He took everything that happened to him, every single unfair, harsh, unjust thing, and he made it his teacher. He did not ask, "Why me?" He asked, "What is this teaching me?" And that shift, that single, quiet, radical shift in the relationship with your own life, is the difference between a person who is destroyed by events and a person who is defined by how they respond to them. Highly effective people are not people to whom nothing bad happens. They are people who have made a sacred agreement with life. Whatever you bring me, I will use it. Whatever you take from me, I will not be diminished. Because who I am does not live in my circumstances. It lives in my response. That is amor fati. That is the seventh habit. And it is not a destination. It is a daily practice, a choice made fresh every morning, every time something arrives uninvited. Love what is. Not because it's easy, but because it is the only response that keeps you fully alive, fully present, fully powerful, in whatever this life brings. 7 habits. Rooted not in a weekend seminar or a best-selling framework, but in a philosophy that has endured for over 2,000 years, because it is built on the most unchanging thing there is, human nature. Let's walk them back one more time, slowly. Habit 1. Control what you can. Release everything else. Pour your energy into the things that are actually yours to shape. Habit 2. Practice voluntary discomfort. Choose the hard thing before it chooses you. Build the resilience that cannot be manufactured any other way. Habit 3. Act with intention, not reaction. Find the pause between what happens to you and how you respond. That pause is where your power lives. Habit 4. Live by your values, not your moods. Let your character lead, not your emotional weather. Because your character is who you actually are. Habit 5. Pursue virtue, not validation. Build your life for yourself, not for an audience. The deepest satisfaction a human being can know comes from integrity in the dark. Habit 6. Remember that you will die, not to be paralyzed by it, but to be liberated by it. To stop wasting the irreplaceable gift of your time on things that do not matter. Habit 7. Love what is. Take everything life brings, the beautiful and the brutal, and make it your ally, not your defeat. These are not 7 things to do. These are 7 ways of being. And the extraordinary thing about Stoic philosophy, the reason it has survived wars, empires, civilizations, and 2,000 years of human history, is that it does not ask you to change your world. It asks you to change yourself. And when you change yourself, genuinely, deeply, at the level of character, everything around you begins to transform. Your relationships, your work, your peace, your effectiveness. Not because the world became easier, but because you became stronger than the world's difficulty. Marcus Aurelius, who had every earthly reason to become cynical, corrupted or despairing, chose something different. Every single morning, alone, before the world demanded anything of him, he wrote these words as a reminder not just for himself, but it seems across the centuries for us. Confine yourself to the present. Do what nature requires. Set out immediately if possible, and don't look around to see if people will know about it. Waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be. Be one. You have the philosophy now. The question is never whether it will work. The question is, will you? Before you leave, I want to ask you something. Of these 7 habits, which one do you need most right now? Not in theory, in your actual life. This week, today. Drop it in the comments. Even just the number. Because the act of naming it, publicly, even to a community of strangers, is the first step toward doing something about it. And this channel exists for exactly that. For people who don't want to just consume wisdom, but who want to live it. If this video moved you, please share it with someone who needs to hear this. Not because it helps the channel, though it does, but because there are people in your life right now who are one idea away from a breakthrough. This might be theirs. If you haven't subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? Click subscribe, ring the bell, and join a community of people who are choosing every day to build a stronger mind and a more intentional life. We have much more coming. Ancient wisdom, modern application. No fluff, no shortcuts, just the kind of thinking that actually changes lives. Until next time, stay stoic.